Well, good morning, everyone. Sorry I'm a few minutes late. Had to rush up and vote. Here we are now, over 2 weeks into the government shutdown, and it appears our Republican friends are digging in even deeper. You know, this is a shutdown where President Trump controls the White House, Republicans control the House, controls the Senate. This can be solved virtually overnight if there was actual negotiation. And it's been surprising to me that there's been very little. Lots of conversations, but unfortunately I've come to the conclusion that in the Senate, and I think even the worse in the House, there will be no break on this issue until Donald Trump gets involved. The idea that there would be any kind of independent acting Republicans, and I've been proud to work on all of those gangs in the past, at least at this moment in time, would be simply a fantasy. Donald Trump rules the Republican Party with an iron fist, and he has to be in the negotiations to get this dispute resolved. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not seeing unprecedented pressure from the Trump administration. Frankly, they're not even hiding their illegality. They are clearly trying to target what are so-called Democratic priorities. I guess that means things like providing financial assistance to underserved communities with community development financial institutions. I guess that means providing disease warning from the CDC, although they fired a lot of people there and then had to hire them back up because it was, stupidly thought through. A lot of folks at the mental health and substance abuse community are being fired. I guess that means concerns about drug overdoses is only a Democratic priority. And I've been with a lot of federal workers this week. I doubt if many of my Republican colleagues have been, and they are angry. They're pissed off. They feel like Russ Vought, who is as President Trump himself has declared, the Grim Reaper, has targeted the federal workforce in an unfair, biased, and just plain cruel way. And they want us to hold firm, to push back. I would point out as well that all of these firings during the shutdown, I felt are illegal. The president has no additional powers. And in a good news note, a judge in California last night put all the firings on hold because the government couldn't produce any reasonable reason why. They were pointing out that folks who were locked out of their government computers couldn't even find if they were being fired. And then if they did find, they couldn't turn to the HR department to get their paperwork because they're shut down. So, and the remarkable thing about what I heard about the court case this morning was when the government was pressed on, what are your underlying reasons, the government attorneys wouldn't give any underlying reason. So what appears to be blatant illegality, at least for the time being, has been shut down by a court order, and I think that's good news. Why are we still in this battle in the first place? Quite clearly because we are also approaching a healthcare cliff. Virginians are receiving this month notices that their health insurance rates are going to more than double. Those who buy, the 24 million Americans who buy through the Obamacare marketplace. Many of these are small businesses. Again, traditionally supporters of the Republican Party. The examples are numerous. We cited a couple making 80 grand in Roanoke that were in the early 60s. They would have their rates go, I think, from like $847 a month to over $2,000 a month. Similar type doubling in every market in Richmond and Virginia Beach. In Northern Virginia, I've not seen the numbers, but I know they're pretty awful as well. And I think people are going to get these notices and say, oh my gosh, I understand what this is all about now. And the idea that you could punt this till the end of the year, well, people have to choose their health care plan or drop out starting November 1st. And the point I make is that, you take all the folks who are going to get disrupted from Medicaid coverage as that gets cut back over the next year plus. And we've already seen hospital systems cut back on rural health clinics because of those future cuts. And now you take millions more who buy their insurance through the marketplace. They're going to be thrown off. What are they going to do? They're still going to get sick. They're just going to show up at the emergency room and come out as uncompensated care. What does that mean? That means in English that those costs at the emergency room, which are the highest costs in our whole healthcare system, are passed on to all the rest of us who have other kind of private health insurance. What does that mean? Well, that means all of our rates are going to go up. Our healthcare system is rickety enough. It's got plenty of problems. What we don't need to do is put it on a march to further destruction by pushing literally millions of Americans off healthcare coming the beginning of November. So this can be resolved. Donald Trump needs to sit down in a room. He could even pick the Democrats he wants in the room. That would be fine, because there is a rational way to get it done. And it could be done in less than a day. But the current process, which is let's try to simply harass federal workers and go after so-called democratic priorities, I think it's actually having the opposite effect, at least from the federal workers that I hear from. So with that, why don't we, I'll turn it over to Val and take some questions.
Senator, the first question is from Nicholas Benton with the Falls Church News Press. Nicholas, are you there? Okay, we're going to move on to Mark Gadd with CBS 19.
Hey, Senator, thanks so much for your time. I just had a quick question about the federal compact that was sent to 9 universities, including UVA, asking universities to obviously to sign on and apply to sort of the political agendas coming from the White House in favor of more federal funding. And so just wanted to get your thoughts on that, and also get your thoughts on if you think that pressure from the White House regarding everything that happened with Jim Ryan and him stepping down was going to cause any change based on how the university responds, because we see the last person to sort of not comply with orders coming from the White House got the boot. So do you think that's going to play a role in the university's decision?
Sure. Well, one of the things is I think Jim Ryan was pushed out for completely not valid reasons. My understanding was the university was more than prepared to turn over the documents the White House had wanted, and frankly that certain board members had urged them not to, which I think deserves a lot further investigation. The one thing I can tell you, these compacts, which I think are illegal and frankly would politicize our universities at an unprecedented level, would be a disaster for any university to sign. I know MIT, they had a board meeting and I think the provost or the dean of faculty had said MIT would lose 300 or 400 of its best faculty members if the university signed that political document. So MIT as a world-class university would no longer exist. It said no. I think the other universities, I know, particularly with the political pressure put on, it's tough, but the idea that you're going to limit your researchers' ability to research based upon the whims of this White House would be a giant step backwards and a giant gift to China. As we destroy our world's best universities, it allows China then to further recruit our best professors. So this is not only stupid on the basis of education policy and against basic First Amendment rights and other rights we've held dear in this country, but it's also would be a disastrous national security mistake if our top universities signed and we were literally losing 20 or 30% of our best faculty. And frankly, it would be a mistake whether that faculty goes to China or even ends up in the UK or Germany, which already have active recruitment programs going on to try to hire away top researchers because they feel like the political pressure from this White House is so unbearable. So I'll be anxious to see what the university does, but I hope most would follow suit from the leadership that MIT has provided.
Senator, the next question is from Jason Miller with Federal News Network.
Thanks, Al. Hey, Senator, I appreciate your time. I'm interested in what you're hearing from government contractors, specifically, obviously, in the Northern Virginia area. I know several, based on some reporting, are starting to take some what they call austerity measures, specifically asking folks who was not related to contracting specifically to take some PTO or time off to reduce their costs. Others, Peraton, for instance, has filed some WARN Act notices to do layoffs. What are you starting to hear? What are they telling you? Anything you can provide?
Sure. Well, Jason, first of all, I've got legislation, and Tim Kaine and I are working on this together, to provide back pay for federal contractors as well, the way we already did the law that Donald Trump signed in 2019 to provide back pay for federal employees. I think federal contractors ought to get that same protection. I'm not sure it's going to go through. We got legislation out there. I have a number of the defense contractors, because there was such a plus up on the big bill. I would call it the big ugly bill that passed this year. I don't think the DoD contractors have felt it as much. But the truth is, yes, contractors don't get that back pay. And I am very concerned. It's one of the reasons why we got to get this shutdown done. Let's get in a room, do a negotiation, and reach agreements so we don't hit the healthcare cliff and we get the government back opening. This is not a big ask, and particularly, the President of the United States has shown his ability to kind of force deals, and I give him credit for what happened in terms of Gaza and Israel. He ought to bring that same attention and focus to this crisis here in America. Let's get it done. I cannot believe that reasonable people in a room for a single day couldn't get this resolved, because our contractors are hurting. I think they need back pay support that we need to put in legislation. I doubt, with the mean-spiritedness of the Trump administration, they'll agree to that. But this is, again, one more reason why we've got to get this resolved.
Senator, the next question is from Rebecca Turco with WJLA.
Hi, Senator. Thank you for taking the time. Had a question regarding layoffs, and if it's possible afterward to have a follow-up, but wanted to see if you could talk more about the federal judge's temporary order on the continued layoffs. Do you see that as a temporary win? What do you want to see happen from there?
Well, I see it, the judge in California, as giving a temporary win for the federal employees. They're already in a shutdown mode. They have been treated as political pawns by this administration. They are living in fear, at least having a judge say, no, you can't go out, and I think the judge used the term arbitrary and capricious, and fire people willy-nilly. That is relief. Now, will that ruling stand? As I'm sure the administration will appeal it. I think the law is clear, and it should stand. But it all begs the question of, we got to get this resolved. And the unfortunate thing is, I don't think the ability to get this resolved lies with the Republican Senate or Republican House leadership. I think they have been, had all their power taken away. I think they have to get all of their answers from Donald Trump and the White House. So let's get Donald Trump and the White House engaged. We can get this resolved.
Senator, the next question is from Mariel Carbone with DC News Now.
Hi, Senator. Just to follow up on the last question, I know that we were seeing numbers of potentially up to 10,000 federal workers being fired or risked during this shutdown. Do you think that the administration will just continue on with its firings despite this court order? I know we've obviously seen them ignore some court orders in the past. And just what do you make of that number of potentially 10,000 federal employees losing their jobs?
Listen, this is purely a fear tactic by a very mean-spirited Rust vote. If there was even some logic that said, okay, we're going to try to cut back in these areas and these departments, and this is part of a longer-term plan, no. 10,000 is a number picked out of the sky to try to intimidate and frighten people. It is mean, it is wrong, it is, at least at this point, illegal. And whether the administration follows a court order or it chooses to ignore it. If they choose to ignore it, the number of my Republican friends who've said, oh, Mark, I know this guy's going crazy, but at least he hasn't ignored court orders. Well, if he starts ignoring court orders, the question is, do we have a constitutional democracy anymore? And people who've excused this behavior so far, they're going to have a really tough question to answer because we are seeing on an almost daily basis this administration push against law, against norms, against its own federal workforce. And there's public pushback. The Democrats push back. But unfortunately, there has been virtual complete silence from my Republican colleagues. And that's a bitter pill for me to swallow as somebody who's taken pride in trying to work on all these issues on a bipartisan basis.
Senator, we're going to go back to Nicholas Fenton with the Falls Church News Press one more time. Nicholas, are you there? Okay, so that is all the time we have for questions.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Take care.